Once I'm ready, I make sure the wheel is dry. I'm going to take it and smack it in the wheel. And you have to smack it so that it's going to attach to the wheel. And then I tend to do just a little bit of centering as I start. So the first step, as you're going through your steps, was wedge, W-E-D-G-E, which I did over here. Step 2 is centering the clay on the wheel. Give you a second to write that. All right, so I start with the clay moving on the wheel. I just press the pedal down a little bit. Are any of you left-handed? Nobody? All right, that makes things easy. So the clay is rotating this way, and I'm just gonna first start, get it going a little bit, by hitting the clay on the side, because I didn't quite get it in the center. You really get it exactly in the center. This one's pretty off, but that's okay. So I'm just gonna kind of work, hit it a little bit to get it in the center. And I wanna keep it mounded as I'm doing this. So I'm kind of holding my hand at an angle as it comes around like this. There we go. So as it's coming around, I'm getting it pretty close to center that way. Once I feel like it's pretty close, that the mound is actually closer to the center, I'm gonna get it wet and get my hands wet. I like to be wet, but not gooey. So I repeatedly wet it. And now is where bracing is really important, because this is moving a lot. And the clay wants to move me. I have to think of being steady. If you think of moving the clay, like this clay is really coming around, and every time it comes around, it's pushing that hand back. If I think of like pushing back, like get over there, every time that clay comes at me, by the time I've pushed back, that lump is over here. So it's just gonna end up getting worse. So the goal is not to push back, the goal is to be steady. So if I'm holding this clay right here with the heel of my hand, keep it wet, keep my hands wet. Do you see how it's pushing my hand back like a lever? So I'm gonna dig my elbow into my leg, and I'm gonna lean in and just work on being as steady as I can. So I'm pushing with this part of my hand because that's backed by my whole arm. If I push here, it's just go flap in the breeze. Not gonna work because there's no strength behind this. So I'm pushing right here with my hand, leaning into it. I put this thumb up and I put this hand on top. So I'm compressing the clay into the center of the wheel. Now here's a common thing students do. They'll press with the hand like this, and then you get like almost like a puddle in the top. And that isn't going to keep your clay workable. The top gets slippy, it's hard to work with. So I try to keep my hand rounded as I put this in here, as I put that hand on there, so that I'm forcing it in the center of the wheel. Now, because I was kind of off when I first smacked it on the wheel, there's some clay on this wheel that's moving my hand around. And I want to get rid of that. So I just take my thumb and move that. Get rid of those bits over there. And if I hold it steady on the wheel, it's going to take it off so it's the same distance from the center all the way around. So I come in again, I lean in, and I have my left hand resting on the wheel, my top hand resting on there. And it should feel like even pressure. Now, there's students who've been, it takes a while. Sometimes centering the blob will come real easy. Sometimes it doesn't work for you. And you always want to move away really slowly, because when you finally get it centered and you're like, all right, I got it, you want to release it slowly so that it stays in position. There's students who they've been working at it for a while, they can't quite get this one, and they're like, all right, I got it. What'd I just do? I knocked it off as I brought my hands away. That's why I always want to move away slowly. And you won't normally knock it off quite that much. You'll knock it off a little bit by pushing away or coming away quickly. But it will make a difference. So once you get it centered, you want to release your pressure from the clay gradually, always gradually, so that you get it in place. Now, the next step is an optional step. I'd like you to try it the first time, but for some students it really helps them. For some students it messes them up every time. So we're going to try it a couple times. It helps you get a feel for the clay, and you decide if you want to keep doing it or not. So step 3 is the optional wheel wedging. Do you guys wear a wedge? No? We'll try. See what you think. All right, so for wheel wedging, it's the same kind of thing. It's going to get the air out, but it does it on the wheel. So what you're doing, you're in centering position. You're going to move the other hand to the other side. I like to keep my thumbs touching. Anything you can brace, the better. The more things you can have touching each other, the better, because it's going to be stronger. And I'm just going to press my hands together. and it makes the clay into like a cone shape. I go nice and slow. When I get to the top, I'm gonna do like a karate chop on the top and push it back down on the wheel. And what this does, it gets the clay even more consistent. Any air pockets that might be left rise to the top and I can get rid of them. And again, I want it to be in a mound. I don't want to get a hole in the center. So I kind of go that way. And you can do this a few times. And like I said, for some students, they love it. It helps them get it really consistent. It makes the rest of it easier to do. Some students find that this really sets things off and they don't like it. So that's your call. Try it out, see what you think. Did you see that little inconsistency in the surface there? It's kind of hard to see, but that was an air pocket that just worked itself out. All right. So now I got my mound in the middle. It's nice and rounded. It feels wedged. It feels centered. It's even pressure. Centered is even pressure on my hand. That's how I know it's centered. Now I'm going to go right back into that centering hand position and watch this next step and then write it down. So watch first. And I get a little more water on that outside. And I'm going to slide my thumb down my other thumb. Now I set it off. And get it back. Slowly release the pressure, and I tend to open it up by using my middle finger. So I back my middle finger. Remember, I'm going to brace everything I possibly can. I'm going to find the center. If this is moving at all, I'm not in the center. I rest my thumb on the top. I support and brace my middle finger. I'm talking too long and it's drying out on me. I support and brace my middle finger with my other finger. So I'm compressing the lip there with this. And then I'm going to press straight into the wheel. As if the clay weren't there, I'm making a straight line down. And notice my hands are braced together. My thumb is at the top so that that lip doesn't get too thin. And it's as if there's a string going from the tip of my middle finger to the center of the wheel. And I go till I think I'm about a ½ inch from the bottom. I don't know, I'm guessing. You're going to guess for a while until you kind of figure it out. Move away slow. And I got to come out now because that's getting dry. That's dry clay in there. And I want it to stay wet so that it moves around the wheel. Once I have it open, I like to wet with a sponge because I don't like getting puddles. I want to be able to see what's going on in there. Some people throw with more water than I do. So if you find that helps you, feel free. I don't like puddles. I want to see it. I like the information. So I get my hands wet. I got my clay wet. I'm going to go into the center. And I'm going to show you my hand position before I do that. So I have one hand here. The centering hand is still there as a brace. My thumbs are braced together. I made a straight line from the tip of my fingertip straight down to the bottom. So the line is like, boom. I go straight to the center of the wheel. And as I hit the center, I take my hand out slowly. But notice this is at an angle. And what that does is it gives me a little bit of an angle inside so I can see what I'm doing. And I can keep my whole hand there as a brace. So once that fingertip hits the center, now I add a little more water, and now I want the line from my fingertip to go toward me. So it's like going right to my belly button. I'm gonna go straight down and then straight toward me, and that's gonna flatten my bottom. So we'll pause and write now. So we did, number 3 was wheel wedge. Number 4 is open the clay or make the hole, whatever you wanna put down so it makes sense to you. Opening it up. And then number 5 is flattening the bottom. So step 5, flatten the bottom. All right. And then to flatten the bottom, I go in, I go toward me, and I like to go right back in the middle to compact it. Because what happens is I've taken those clay particles and I've stretched and widened them to flatten the bottom, and they're like this. Trying to like hang on to their friends like they're out there in the cliff, hey, over there, and you got to bring them back so they can just sort of chill and be together. Because if they stay stressed and pulled out like that, you're gonna get little cracks on the bottom of your piece. So one way to keep it all together is you bring the little clay particle friends back there, so you're just chilling in the bottom. Okay, there you go, come back. So I wet this, I wet this. I start in the center. I make a straight line with my center finger. It's backed by the other 2. toward me until I feel like I get a straight line with my fingers. And then again, I move away slowly. So I want to stop when it feels straight, like this. And when it's straight like that, then I have a flat bottom and a nice corner. Now, chances are not good. I'm going to get it perfect the first time. So I usually come back in, wet my hands. I'm going to come back in, start at that corner. I'm going to go back into the center to kind of compress them, you know, help them chill out with each other. And sometimes to get it really flat, you end up going back and forth a couple times. And I want to make sure I'm using the little fleshy part of the tip of my finger. That's the part that's really pressing because it's not going to hurt. It's nice, it's got a little give, works out well. And again, move away slow. So I want to get a nice flat bottom and a nice corner on the side. That's my goal. So the walls are straight, the bottom's flat. Now I got to start to bring up the wall because right now it's really thick. So now, Roxy, if you need to move, feel free. My videographer here has to come on the side too. So I'm going to cross my thumbs because again, they're strong, and I'm going to make like a heart. Oh, see, isn't that nice? This is the heart. Remember, it's a heart. It's nice. If I do this and make like this little C and my fingertips go together, they're not strong. This is stronger. This is just going to like whip my hands around the side because I don't have the right angle. Ooh, the right angle again. This is strong. This is strong because I have that right angle there. I can hold that position. And I'm going to start right at that bottom, right at that corner. And I'm not pressing up. I'm actually pressing my fingertips together slightly. And you'll want to do this a couple times just to feel what it feels like to let the clay run through your fingers without really pressing. And then once you get that feel, then you add a little bit pressure toward the bottom. And you're going to slowly lighten your pressure as you come toward the top because I don't want to get thin at the top. Having this compressed helps keep it centered. I'm going to add a little water to it again. And there's different ways to do the walls. I think that's one of the hardest parts. You actually typically want to slow the wheel down a little bit when you do the wall. This speed's okay, so I'm going to keep going. But you're adding pressure toward each other, so it would be like your fingers were touching if the clay weren't there, and that forces the clay to go up. Now, do you see how the clay is getting thinner at the lip? So right there at the lip is where I want to release the pressure and come all the way off. I don't ever stop mid-wall because it will dump a little piece of clay, and then that little thicker piece of clay is going to make it harder to keep my wall centered. That little bump is going to bug me. So I always got to go up past the top. Another thing you can do if that's not working is called a knuckle pull. I can also take the side of my finger, I go like this, and pull with the side of a knuckle and come across the top. That tends to move a little more clay. You can kind of get under it and move some clay. Some people like taking the sponge. Let's get this wet. And they kind of press on the sponge so the inside, your fingers are touching the clay, and the outside, the sponge is touching the clay. And you're just pressing together as if they would touch if the clay weren't there. And after you do a few pulls on the wall to bring it up, again, all the way past the top, release the pressure. Then you want to compact the lip so you don't get this uneven lip. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put one finger on either side and I'm going to rest my finger on the top. And that's going to keep that lip a little bit thicker, a little bit compacted so that it's not going to get too thin on there. So we'll pause to write it down. Number 6 is pull up the walls. And then number 7 is compact the lip. So pulling up the walls, I want to see your hand positions here. We're going to practice for a minute. You can pause it if you want. Cross your hands, cross your fingers, like so. Now show me your heart. Let's see. Can you tip it? Yeah. There you go. Yes, yes, yes. That's it. That's it. That's it. Julia, where are you going? All right. Now, for compacting the lip, you're going to take your left hand, your 2 fingers, kind of point them down, and cross with an A. It's like the ceramic gang sign. Hey. Don't flash that in the hallway. You get in trouble. You put one finger on each side, make sure they're wet. And I'm not really pressing, I'm just resting. One on each side, press like this, just like this. Hey, let's see. Let me see you do it. Left hand, 2 fingers down, There. Don't do it in the hallway. Don't do it by the cameras, okay? There you go. So that's compacting the lip. The next one is undercut the foot. I'm gonna pull the wall up a little more before you go. And I'll explain that one in just a second. Oh, here, this is a good point. Do you see how my lip got a little uneven? That happens pretty easily when it's really easy to set it off. So if that happens, where the lip is uneven, right before you're gonna be done, the walls are exactly the way you want them, right before you're gonna be done, it's just like you're compacting the lip, you're gonna put one finger on either side, but now you have the needle, it's like evil gang sign, right? And you're gonna go right below the lowest point, steady it all the way through. As soon as it's all the way around, you lift, take off the gooey wormy top, and then compact it again. And what that does is it evens the lip. So even if it's slightly off center, now your lip is even. And then be done. Because if I pull this up again, which I'd like to do because it's a little bit thick yet. There you go. There. Now, the last thing we're gonna do, actually it's not quite the last. We have all this clay dumped here. In a well-made pot, it's all the same thickness throughout. So I want to get rid of this. I like these ribs and these ribs when I'm on the wheel for this reason. Because what I can do now is I'm going to come in, like a snow plow. I get this wet, and it's going to go. See? It's like snow plow. Took it all away. You can pretend like you're 5. You know, you're playing with cars again, making noises. There you go. I still have to do that with my boys. They're old. So the reason why there's a hole in here is so you can grab onto it. So grab onto the hole, get a good hold of it, and you're gonna come in, level with the wheel, come right up to it, and just push in there until you get all that extra clay off. And then take that off, and then you turn it around to the pointy side, and you're gonna take your pointy side and go underneath. See, just like that. I expect to hear sound effects when you guys are on the wheel. It's much more fun that way. And then you get that little undercut on the wheel so you can stop your glaze. Now, I personally like the throwing rings. I think they look cool. So after I do that, I tend to go back in, and I don't press very hard at all. I just get rid of that little lip, and then I add a little bit of pressure. Ooh, little bump. And I add the throwing rings back because I like those. But if it's really gooey, especially when you're starting, it's real easy to get gooey and like it's real slippy. If you get that and you want to get some of the goo off so it's easier to take off the wheel, you can just come all the way up with your rib and get rid of it. Well, maybe I'll leave those throwing rings. I'm gonna get rid of these little edges I just got and kind of even that out. Boogers, a couple boogers on the inside. Now, one thing I forgot to mention, I never touch this at all unless I'm braced. I'm always braced here because it's really easy to not realize it, but if you're not steady, just like, boom, and like all this work, like, oh, now there's this big gash over here, something happens. So I always make sure I'm braced every time I touch it. Kind of messed up my lip there, but we'll fix it, good enough. So now, the foot is undercut, the walls I think are even, the bottom is as even as if I want to test the bottom, there's a little trick I can do. I can take my needle tool, and here's, don't put your needle tool in your water, because you stab yourself when you get it. Leave the, I usually put this, my rib and my sponge I often leave in the water because it makes me easier to clean later, but don't do it with your needle, it's painful. I can also stick this in there, see how far down it goes, and check it. I'm not going to do it because I have to compact the bottom again, and I don't want you guys to have to watch me. But I can say, oh, my goal is about that thick. You know, a little more than 1/4 of an inch is good. Now I'm done. So I get my wire tool, which I left over here, nice and handy. And I'm going to take a little bit of water. I'm going to slide that little puddle over here. And I'm going to release, I'm going to wait. I wind this around my finger a little bit. I scoop a little water under there. It's got a knot in it. I'm gonna go on this end a little bit. Make sure this is clean so you get a nice edge. I scoop a little water, I slide it off, and it should move. Oh, it moved a little bit, I'm good. Notice how hard I'm pressing this into the wheel. If you don't, it can slice your bottom in half. So you really press it into the wheel. Now, see all these goobers? If I just let this unfold, it's gonna spatter me in the face and the person next to me, you know, and then they wanna like meet me at the bike racks or mad at me, it's no good. So put it below, wipe off the extra goobers, the slurry, I guess would be the technical term. And before it rebonds, your wheel aid will have ready for you a board and a paper towel with your name on it so that you're all set to go. I'm gonna slide this apart carefully so I don't release all that water, just a little bit. I'm gonna slide this underneath the wheel head so I can now take my clean hand so I don't mess it up. You gotta do it pretty quick or it'll rebond to the wheel and go. And now it's on there. If I mess it up with finger marks, I can go like this, even it out. If you put this in your locker for one night, it should just go to leather hard and you can fix up any little inconsistencies and things the next day. If you can get it underneath the hand dryer for a few minutes, put a paper plastic bag over it and you can wrap it that way. And voila. Your first couple cylinders, you need to have 2. I say, you know, good job, Ms. Rosen. I'm gonna give you a B for this one. Could be a little more even. You put this in your locker and you save it. You don't have to wrap it up or anything. At the end of a couple weeks of throwing, I'm gonna say, show me your cylinders. When you get 2 Bs, throw out any Cs. When you get an A, throw out a B. You should always keep 2. Keep your 2 best grades, and your grade at the end of the unit is whatever you have. You got 2 As, you got an A. So if you want to come in, if you don't have A's, you want to do better, come in, throw some more. Once you have 2 A's, you can keep whatever you want. Until you have 2 A's, you can keep 1. If you have 1 that you make, leave it leather hard, because you can always, if you think you make a better one the next day, slice the one from the day before and keep the one you made that day. You know what I mean? So you can kind of keep